Live.
Okay.
You do your thing.
Sweet. Music stuff. Yeah. Woo. Woo. Yeah, exactly. All right. Tell me when you go live.
I am live.
Chee. Exactly. This guy gets it.
Oh, let me turn off my mic.
Are we streaming? All right. So, welcome to DJ Donut's Practical Music Theory 101. It's not the best music theory class, but it's free. Terms and conditions apply. So, lesson one, what we're going to be going over is just why you should learn music theory and just some really basic fundamentals. Since I talked to a lot of people, on the server, and they were really interested in learning some more music theory, and I know kind of like a good solid baseline of music theory. I wanted to sort of share that knowledge. And this first lesson, probably for the next couple, I'm just going to be going over some like fundamentals, some really basic stuff to just kind of catch everybody up. And then hopefully we can go over some really cool stuff, go over stuff y'all want to learn, and kind of like dissect certain songs or learn certain genres and whatever y'all want to do. So that's the plan. And yeah, so I don't know if there's anything y'all want to say or anything, but this is the first time doing this, so it's probably really scuffed. But I'm also using this first time as sort of a way to see like how long it's going to take, how people enjoy it, what I could do differently. So any feedback is super useful. So let me go to the next slide. So yeah, before we start, a few things. Please trade it for this is for people in the server. Please try to stay quiet unless you have something you want to add or have a question. But also being goofy and stuff is fine as long as it doesn't get out of control. Smile, Feel free to ask questions in the chat or in the VC whenever. I'll keep the chat open and read it as it's going on. And afterward, feel free to give whatever suggestions of stuff you want to learn or stuff I can do better. And I want to make this like a really fun, productive, educational thing that people can enjoy. And yeah, Cubic says, make sure to read any questions out loud. Yeah, will do. I'll read any of the questions that are in chat. I'll read them out loud and then I'll answer them. So people that are rewatching it, they can know what the questions are. Here we go. So I guess the first thing we're going to go over is why should I'm looking at you. Why should you learn music theory? So I think the main reason that people should learn music theory is because it really gives you like a good toolbox of, yeah, I got a whole presentation. I'm prepared, dude. I'm ready. So it really gives you like a good toolbox of music as a good toolbox of musical concepts to take from and utilize whenever you need. So what that means is whenever you're working on a new song, and you're like, I need to do this thing, or I have this thing I want to convey, or this emotion I want to convey, or whatever. You have all these tools at your disposal that you can pick and choose from and use to tackle any problem that you have. And the other main reason is it's sort of like a universal language that whenever you're talking with other musicians, you can say, hey, I think this would sound good with this, or I like the way you did this with this in terms of, the songwriting. And you're able to sort of easily have this free flow of conversation. It's like talking to another music producer and you can talk about all these like plugins and stuff, and they all know what it is, They all know the terminology and like all these terms, and it's very similar when it comes to music theory. That you can sort of be like, hey, I think you should resolve this chord this way, and people it makes it really simple and easy. And also, third point, phone on. Duh. And so a big thing when it comes to learning music theory is that there are some really like common hesitations that I hear from people that are wanting to learn theory. And one of them is, I already have a good ear. Like people are sort of hesitant to learn music theory because they think I don't need to learn music theory, or music theory is gonna like hurt my ear because all of a sudden in the second point I'm gonna like follow a set of rules and it's going to just harm my creativity or this inherent set. And a big thing from my personal experience and everyone else I've ever talked to who like knows music theory is it only helps you. I've never met anybody who has learned music theory and like regrets it or anything, because you still have all these senses in your style and everything like that. It just opens you up to new options, and it makes things way easier. That I can like open up a track and like be writing a chord progression, and I'm not, like fiddling around, spending way too much time fiddling around. I know how to achieve the thing I want to achieve, and if I want to do it differently, then I can do it a bit differently, And the second point, music shouldn't follow a set of rules. And so music theory has like these fundamental concepts that you're sort of encouraged, but not really. It depends on what you're learning, but in certain concepts, they're there to help differentiate your music and make it sound more unique. And then sometimes if you're making something and you think, I think this sounds better if I don't do it the way that music theory wants me to, or whatever, you don't have to do it that way, but you know how to. And sometimes you use it, sometimes you don't. And that's what I mean by it's a toolbox. You don't use every single tool in your toolbox for every song. You approach a song and you approach a problem and you have a couple tools that you need. And then for another problem that you're working on, you have a couple other tools that you use for that problem, So you just have this wide array of things that you can pick and choose from, and it's helpful. It's really helpful, and it makes things way easier. And it doesn't hurt. There's no reason why you shouldn't learn, in my opinion. It's just overall a really helpful thing to learn. So, this is Joe, guys. Why don't you say hi? Can I get a hi, Joe, in the chat?
What's
Hey?
up, Joe?
Joe.
What's up, Joe?
Gotcha, Joe Mama. Y'all fell for it. Okay, so let's go over the basics of music theory. So, we're gonna go. So now that we've sort of gone over like why you should learn music theory, I want to spend this first time sort of just going over the very like super simple concepts and terminology that we'll use on a regular basis for the next following weeks, just so people sort of have that basic language, like you're learning conversational music theory. So we're going to go over half steps and whole steps, scales and keys, scale degrees, intervals, and some really basics of chords, because I want to do chords and chord progression stuff next week. But we're going to try and dip our toes in, just get a little bit started. So first thing we're going to learn about, right? Y'all ready? Half steps and whole steps. So everything in music theory is built from a set of whole steps and half steps. So what that means, a half step is just a term we use to denote, or like whatever, to mean going up by one note, or a semitone. And then a whole step is when you go up by two notes. That's a whole step, right? So we got the C to the C sharp and then the C to the D. That's half step, whole step. This is pretty simple, but this is just a useful term that we use. So when I'm going down the line, I'm not having to like explain every time, The next thing is scales and keys. So the major and minor scales and all the other like modes and stuff are built from a certain sequence of whole and half steps, right? So a major scale is built up from whatever note you start from. It goes whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And then minor scales are whole, half, whole, half, whole. You could learn these if you want to. I don't think it's that important. I think also just learning, you don't have to memorize all the notes and the scales, since you're using like a DAW and you can, have your scale thing open. But it's useful to know, what notes are in the different scales. It's just a really handy thing to know how to do. And I recommend it, but this is practical music theory, and you may not have to learn that. You could just, whatever. But I don't know what else I want to talk about on this slide. It ran a scope of a series of whole and half steps. Yeah. And that's how you get every major and minor scale. Let's get to this. Okay. So this is where I think we get into a little bit more complicated stuff. Not really complicated, but where we start to get more into like the a little bit into the nitty gritty, right? So scale degrees and Roman numerals. So for each scale or chord, you can label the different notes by Roman numeral values, right? So since there are 7 notes in a scale, each note is assigned a different Roman numeral number. And then we can use these numbers when building different types of chords. So essentially, the way to think about this is, let's say we look at C major. The C is also these terms here. You don't really need to know them. The ones, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but the ones that are under the Roman numerals, those aren't very important. I would say knowing the term tonic is useful. Like, so I can say the tonic just means like the root, or the root of your scale, like the whatever. You know what I mean? It's the root note of your scale. So tonic is like a term I'll use a lot, but all the other ones like supertonic, median, etc., I'm never going to use those. I'll use leading tone because leading tone is helpful also, which is the 7th. But you label each one of the notes in your scale a different Roman numeral value. So C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, etc., etc. When looking at a scale. So when it comes to building chords, if I want to say I'm in C major and I want to play an A chord, that would be the 6th chord. Or if I'm in C major and I want to play an F major, that would be the 4 chord. Does that make sense? I don't want to like rush through this too much, but also the other way to think of the way what I mean when it says each scale and chord is it doesn't just apply to scales themselves. When you look at a certain chord, so let's say you look at like an F major chord, the bass note of the F major chord is the 1 in that chord. So that's something I'm gonna move on to more when I move on to the chord section. But you also use these Roman numeral values you assign these Roman numeral values to each sort of note in that builds up and makes up that chord. I want to check in. Does that make kind of sense? And feel free to ask any questions or anything if I didn't explain that well, or if I could explain it better or something. Okay, y'all are typing. I want to see what y'all are saying first. I'll have a pretzel. Okay, they're not typing anymore. All right, well, I'll go on to the next slide then. Oh, there we go. Awesome, man. Intervals. So, let me finish my pretzel first. I don't want to talk while there's food in my mouth. I got you. Intervals are another really useful thing because they represent the distance and pitch between 2 notes. So, over here with this graph, I yoinked from Wikipedia, right? Each one of the number of semitone difference, like each, when you're playing 2 notes at the same time, or 2 notes and whatever, the relationship between 2 notes, they have different terms, right? So, if you have 2 notes playing at the same time and they're the same note, it's a perfect unison, right? But there's different ones for every other thing, right? So, for example, if you go up 2 notes here, from a C to a D, you have a major second. Because the D is the 2 in the C major scale, right? And then from a C to an E, that's a major third, because the E is the 3 in C major. But C to an E flat, it says D sharp here because it's Ableton. I don't have Ableton 11 where I can do scales and stuff, whatever. But C to a D sharp or an E flat is a minor third because E flat is the 3rd in C minor. And also, it goes up 3 notes. So it goes from C, so then it goes up 1, 2, 3, right? A perfect 5th is called a perfect because there's not like a major or minor. It's in every, key. It's the same. That's if you go up 7 notes. So it's C and a G is a perfect 5th. And those are like sort of the main major ones you'll encounter when you're working on music. But these are also all the other ones. And knowing this sort of terminology when, working on your own music and just knowing what different intervals are Oh, Cubic's asking, so the majors and minors change with each key. Right, so the majors and minors change. The major chords and stuff that you use will change depending on the key. But when it comes to like the interval length, with each key, you're different. Like, so for example, if you're in C, I guess I can, okay. So I think this will make more sense when I get to chords. But if you're in C major, the notes in C major go C, D, C, D, E, then E flat, right? So the E flat is the third note in the C minor scale. So the third of that will be an E flat. But then in C major, it goes C, D, E. So then the third of that would be an E. And these just happen to be like, and then a C and an E is a major third relationship, and a C and an E flat is a minor third relationship. I think it'll make more sense when I get to chords. But I'm sorry if I'm being a bit confusing with it. Hopefully that can kind of clear stuff up. I don't know if I just made it more confusing, though. Yeah, it's one of those things to where, like, there's a lot of, like, little terms and stuff that sort of are all kind of, like, confusing and are somewhat hard to understand until you start to use them. And I think it'll make a lot more sense once you're more familiar with them. And yeah, again, all this type of stuff, it's a bit confusing because you use, like for the Roman numeral ones, you use the Roman numerals not just for the scale, but you also use them for specific notes within a chord. So you can be like, the 5 chord is a G, and then the G is made up the 1, 3, and 5, right? Which I'll get to there when I go over chords again. But and I can revisit this once we go over everything else if you have any more questions. So once I finish over the once I finish over all the main slides, I can come back and revisit stuff as much as y'all want. So I guess I can go real quick to the last part in this little chunk is the circle of fifths. So this seems confusing, but it's not that crazy. So stick with me. The circle of fifths, it's not something that's really like you'll use when making dance music or anything like that, but it's something that is, I just wanted to sort of like introduce you to, so you know what it is, you're familiar with it. It's just a way of sort of organizing these 12 notes in the chromatic scale, so all the notes from C to B, into a sequence of perfect fifths. So as you see, as you go around, each one of these notes is a perfect fifth away from each other. And as you go around, it adds a sharp, adds another sharp to these keys, right? Again, not really that useful to making EDM. It's just something that's useful to know. But what I use it for is if I want to check the relative minor of a key or a relative major of a key that I'm in, right? That's all I use it for. Is that if I'm in like C major or if I'm in like F major, I want to see what the relative minor is. It's D minor. Y'all know what relative minors are? Do I need to go over that real quick? Okay, so I'll go over what a relative minor is real quick, just because that's something that I think I forgot to add in the scale thing. Every scale and mode is based off of what note you start on. So let me go back. Don't say that. Don't weird jam me for the term relative minor. Okay. Okay, so I guess a good way to every major scale has a relative minor scale. So if you don't know what this is, that's actually really interesting. I guess the way to think about it is that in C major, the A minor scale is the exact same set of notes as the C major scale. It's just started on A. What'd you say? In each key, intervals between different notes remain the same. So if you're in C major, note C, E, G, interval is in semitones 3, 2. So the distance between C and E would be 3 semitones, and the distance between E and G would be 2 semitones. Then if you play F. Yeah, this is the way the chords work. This is the way that Music Boy explained the way that the intervals and chords work. But when it comes to relative minors, what that means is for 0 pain. Pain. Yeah, so essentially for the major scale, it goes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then the A major scale is made up with all the same notes. It's just started from A. So every scale, C through C, all these, they have another scale that's the relative minor. It's made up of all the same notes as the major scale. It's just started from that thing. And what that is, and so if we're going to build off these scale degrees, right? So to expand on that, the relative minor is the sixth of whatever scale you're in. So for example, in C, the sixth is A, and it's the relative minor. And why that is because the sixth chord is the minor chord in this scale, which is something I will get more into next week when I go over like chord progressions and stuff. Since I don't want to make these things too long, I want to make them sort of like bite-sized little chunks where I go over some basic concepts each week. But yeah, the sixth in whatever scale you're in will be your relative minor. Yeah. And so yeah, for C, the 6 is A and the A is the relative minor. Can you change between them in a song? Yeah, totally. You can totally switch between major and minor in a song if you're basically playing in the same. Yeah, I mean, Cubic's saying, can you change between them in a song like seamlessly? Yeah, like because they're the same scale. It's not like you're even doing a key change. They're the same notes. It's just sort of like basing what types of notes you start on. Yeah, lots of songs actually use that. Yeah, that's really common. Or to have something that isn't like super major or super minor, because you kind of have both C major and A minor in the same song. Yeah, it's pretty uncommon in EDM, but in pop, it's like all over the place. Keep it asking. So if it's the same scale, what exactly changes the major to minor? Okay, it's sort of. I think I'll get more into this when I go over writing chord progressions, because these are a lot of questions that are sort of based around like getting into chord progressions. Well, the reason is basically what chords you choose and the order of the chords and sort of what your foundation, your root chord is. So if I have a song where it all comes, your root is sort of what your root chord is, what you come back to. Like if you're in C major, your C is like your home, right? But if you're in A minor, your A minor is your home. But if you're in C major, the A minor is sort of like going away somewhere. So it just depends on where your home is, basically. If that makes any sense. Yeah. Yeah. It's all the same notes. It's just, and that's the same thing with modes. Modes are there's a bunch of modes, and they're all made up of these same notes as C major and A minor. They just feel completely different because your home, your root, and all these different chords are in different places. So it gives it a whole different feeling, even though you have the same set of notes. Which is why music theory is so cool. You can use the same set of notes and then get across completely different feelings. Okay. I will go back to where I was. So we went over intervals. Hopefully that makes a bit more sense now, like how there's like sixths and all these types of intervals, and stuff in relation to the Roman numerals and like these major scales. So like the A is a minor sixth away from the C, and like the G is a perfect fifth away from the C. And so and then the perfect fifths sort of explains what it means, but I'll skip over that. Oh, also Joe's on the phone now. I don't know. This guy was just in like the preset presentation I did, so I thought it'd be funny if I left him in, Thank you. Okay, so before we continue, I wanted to take a little break and sort of check in with everybody, and make sure all this stuff sort of makes sense right now. And I guess before we go into chords and stuff, just a little check-in, a little break. If there's any more questions, feel free to ask them right now. If not, then we're all good. But
Yeah, just quickly. How often are M2s
minor seconds.
minor seconds or major seconds? Because I haven't really seen them that often, or even I don't know. Maybe to my ear, I don't really hear them. compared to like major chords.
Well, minor seconds are all chords are made up of a set of those intervals, right?
Yeah.
So if you're just using major and minor chords, you don't use second intervals. But once you're starting to use like ninth chords, all this type of stuff, and just different types of chords, you start to use those second intervals a lot more, and they sound really cool. And I can like if afterwards, if you want me to, I can like show some examples of them being used. I just didn't want to overcomplicate things with these basic stuff. And also, I'm not going into like the uses of this. I just want to like sort of expose people to these concepts. So when we finally get into the more complicated stuff, we already know what all these terms mean,
Hey,
Yeah,
who knows what negative
thank you.
harmony is?
Hey, true. Good point. Good point.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Yeah, you made it like almost at the end. So good job. Yeah, sure.
I will
I'm down.
teach you what.
No,
No,
yeah.
whatever. I
Yeah.
just took a walk. I'm very sweaty.
You can teach the lesson if you want.
What did y'all go over today?
We went over why you should learn music theory, some basic thingies. This is Joe Mama, haha.
Oh,
And
I
then
like the common misconceptions. That's very important. 'Cause that's like my biggest pet peeve is people
oh yeah,
think of music
you
theory
can-
as like a strict rule set you gotta follow. If you don't do these certain rules in music theory, you're not making music and it's wrong, which is the complete opposite of what it is, and it bugs the shit out of me. So,
yeah, exactly. And also the I already have a good ear argument. I also added that because I think music theory doesn't hurt your ear. I
it'll
think
only
it
help
all.
it, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
5 head.
I also I wanted to show you this. Why you should you learn, and I have you.
Let's go. But yeah,
I-
music theory is simply a set of tools to only help you to purely help you accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, and then we went over just some basic terminology because I want to sort of before we actually get into like the nitty gritty, I sort of just want to have people know what these terms are, and then so next week when we get into more crazy stuff, we can sort of I don't have to go back over what all these terms mean, scales, Roman numerals, intervals, circle of fifths,
Circle of
toggers.
fifths is very, very swag.
It is, but I also said for a lot of people, it probably isn't that useful. But if you're trying to go really ham in music theory, it's super useful. So it just depends on what you're trying to do.
I feel like it's very useful, and if you're writing chords, and I think it helps you. I think the way like someone like Jacob Collier describes circle of fifths is very useful just to have that knowledge, and like thinking of one side as like pure major, and the other side is like kind of minor, or like fourths being kind of inherently minor, and it's like stacking fifths being kind of the major feeling, that kind of idea. And you can use that to convey certain feelings or emotions that
Yeah.
you were trying to do. Like, yeah, basically the whole point, the reason
yeah.
everyone should fucking at least think about some theory is that all it does is increase your vocabulary for accomplishing a certain feeling in your music.
No, exactly.
Like,
That's what I said.
all it is just fucking, hey, I want to accomplish this type of feeling or something that gives me this sort of emotional reaction or this sort of movement. How can I do that?
Exactly. That's what I pointed out earlier. Is that it just makes things so much easier, and you don't have to use it if you don't want. Like in certain times, you don't have to use the strict quote unquote rules or guidelines. And then basically, I just pointed out something that it's useful for DJing when mixing in key. That is very true. So each one of these keys that are next to each other on the circle of fifths are just one note apart from each other. So for example, when it comes to C major and G major, they're just the same. They're basically the same key, just they're one note different. They have one they have one note different. So let's say you want to mix two songs together that are more melodic or something like that. It sounds you either want to mix, songs that are in the same key, or you can mix a lot of times you can mix songs that are next to each other on the circle of fifths because it still has that same most of the same notes.
And you can do you can mix from the relative major to the relative minor, or vice versa too.
Yep. If a song's in C major, you can mix it in a song. You can mix in a song that's in A minor.
This being said, you can also, with some creativity, you can mix most stuff. If there are other ways to mix things
Are we
too, if you just
referring
think
to
about
like
it.
DJing in a sense?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was just referring
Yeah.
to DJing because
Learn
Base
the
Boy pointed
Camelot
that out.
wheel because, well, I mean, there's two types of people when it comes to DJing. I think it's just coming from a guy who just kind of bangs his head on that stuff. But there are two types of people: people who like following the actual notes, and then the Camelot wheel.
Isn't
I
the
can recommend.
Camelot wheel just the circle of fifths?
It's literally the circle of fifths essentially, except
It has
it's
like
it's
letters and
numbered. It's in such a
yeah, okay.
it's in a viewable format, and it's almost like, and I'm starting to slowly see people's like
The dumbed
music
down
theory.
circle of fifths.
You're seeing yeah, you're starting to see like music theory on that alone.
Yeah.
So
Music
know.
theory that's what I mean. Even when you're doing stuff like DJing, the circle of fifths is, yeah, like Cubic said, it's just a dumbed down circle of fifths, which is
very
true.
dumbed down, yeah.
But
And in some cases, it's sometimes not even necessary. You don't always need to be in key because you want to change the mood to something a lot more. It's like music theory. Like, yeah, I
yeah, it
don't know
just
where I'm going at
depends.
with this.
Okay. So then we have the Joe's on the okay, we're going. So we did the check-in. Donan hopped in. Dono wall. And okay, so the next thing, the last thing I want to go over, since I wanted to just see this for this one. I just wanted to talk and see what people know, kind of judge where everyone is in terms of music theory and see what people want to learn. And next week, I plan on starting to go over like the basics of building chord progressions and stuff. But I want to dip our toes in chords, so we at least know some like really basics. So the most basic types of chords you can learn you can do are triads. So super simple. All it is you're building a stack of major and minor thirds on top of each other, like this. Oh wait, C, G. Yeah, that's what it is. But that's only for the major scales. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat. But the most chords are built in pop music and in jazz, like most types of music. They're all the foundation of chord progressions are stacking thirds on top of each other, whether it's major or minor thirds, right? So there's four main types of triads. There's major, minor, diminished, and augmented chords. Diminished and augmented chords are a lot less common. They can be really cool if you want to go crazy with music theory and stuff. I think diminished chords are more useful to me than augmented chords, but I don't know. They're useful for whatever purpose it fits in that time.
Diminished chords are OP.
Yeah, they are. And so a major chord is built by going up a major third, then a minor third. Does that make so? All these chords are built from a set of thirds, and then a minor chord is built from a minor third, then a major third. Then
And
a
if you
diminished
want
chord.
another way of thinking about it, is major and minor are based on essentially it's just a root and a fifth, and then the third, which is the middle note, is either a major or a minor.
Yeah, that's also true. Because the perfect fifth stays the same, unless you're
Yeah.
doing like a diminished or an augmented where it's an accidental. But the perfect fifth is the same, and if it's a major chord, you have a major third. If it's a minor chord, you have a minor third. But when you're doing other types of building chords, sometimes it's good and helpful to look at it as if you're building from the ground up, like you're going up a major third, then up a minor third, or you're going up a minor third, then up a major third. Just different ways of looking at the same thing. And it just a really basic. Oh wait, you asked. So the third is what defines it. Wait, the third is what defines if
Yes.
it's a minor or major chord. Yep, the third is whatever determines, because they're the same chord except one of them has a major third interval and one of them has a minor third interval for the cubic 7 and Revelation.
I muted. I deafened for a second because I was looking for something. Did you already
Yeah.
go over just like if we're thinking about like a major chord in like terms of a key, like you have 7 notes in your key, and a major or a minor is just the first, the third, and the fifth
Yeah,
note of that key.
yeah, that's something I also wanted to mention in this part where we're talking about triads. So
Mm-hmm.
your major chords and your chords when you're building these triads are also built of when we're going back to these Roman numeral intervals, so like that sort of term where you have numbers representing each note in your scale or in your chord, it's built of the 1, 3, and 5, right? So if you're in C major, the C is the 1, the E is the 3, and the G is the 5, right? Does that make sense? I want to. That's something that I think it's pretty simple. So right. So
If people don't get it, I think they will get it if you go.
yeah,
If I went into Ableton and just drew like all notes of a scale and said, "Hey, this is the first note of the scale. This is the third note in it, and this is the fifth note in it."
and that's one of the things that I think is one of the first sort of like humps if you have no experience with this, understanding Roman numeral intervals is because it applies to scales and the individual chords within that scale, and the different chords you use. So if I'm talking about the C major scale, it's 1 through 7. But if I'm talking about a C major triad right here, it's built of the 1, 3, and the 5, with C as being our root. So let's say I have an E major chord. That the 1 is the E, the 3 is the G sharp, and the 5 is the B. So let's say or even if we're talking about C major, if we look at, let's say, an F major chord in C major, the F is the 4 chord. I'm going to try and like, the F is the 4 chord in C major, but the notes within F, you still refer to them as the 1, 3, and 5. Does that, I don't know if I'm like overcomplicating things too quickly, but does that sort of make sense to those listening?
That
I'm
I
also
mean,
like,
yeah, basically, if you got a major, like a basic triad, no matter what the root is or whatever key you're in, or whatever the fuck the chord is, whatever the chord is in relation to the key is, the notes in that chord is always going to be the root, like the 1, the 3, and the 5. And
yeah.
it's just, and maybe the 3 is fucking flat, or the 5 is sharp, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah. So, before just to like dip our toes in really is like inversions and other different types of chords. So that's something that we can go over next week. But also like if y'all want to talk about it this week, I'm totally down. So inversions are essentially when you take one of your notes within your triad or any other type of chord and you put it on the bottom, right? So for example, a first inversion chord is where you have the E as the root. Whoops. You have an E as the root, or like for you have your third as your root. So it goes 3, 1, 5. Since your C is still your root note for your C major chord, you just have the 3 on the bottom. So that's a first inversion chord. And then a second inversion is when you have your fifth on your bottom. Does that make sense? So that's what I mean by each chord has their different, number values for each note. So it's first inversion is when you have the 3 on the bottom. Second inversion is when you have the 5 on the bottom. And then
And
these other types of chords up here, just to sort of like briefly overview them, what you can keep adding as many of these, triads as you want on top of each other, and that's how you get different types of chords. Or you can get other types of chords like suspended chords or whatever by moving some notes around, or maybe you get rid of some notes and get like an add 9 chord or whatever, And there's a bunch of different types of chords you can do. And I don't want to like this. I feel like this is a whole lesson, so I don't want to go too crazy in depth into it, but want to familiarize everybody to it before we, finish up, because this is pretty much everything I have right now, unless you want to add anything. Go on.
I think the big takeaway from inversions is, like, if you're writing stuff, I think it's important. Just the main takeaway is you can have a chord be like 3 specific notes, and that can be like, say you have a C major or whatever. You can pitch those notes wherever, like put this one up an octave, that one down an octave. You can do whatever and change the voicing of it. Like don't feel like you have to keep the notes in the order that they're supposed to, you quote unquote think they're supposed to be in. It's
Oh
just, that's
yeah,
the main takeaway when
that's a
you're writing
big
stuff.
totally. That's and a big thing when you're writing chord progressions, which again that'll be the next lesson, which will stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Spacing out your notes in. Because Cubic asked, why does music theory hurt my brain? Because it's confusing. Music theory is confusing when you first start it. It slowly starts to all piece together, but it can be really confusing at first if you have no experience. So you feel free to ask as many questions at the end or later. I will be here to answer whatever you want. And, but yeah, with writing chord progressions, spacing out your notes and not having them in just this set stacking thirds on top of each other sounds really shut up, man. Okay, so it's spacing out your notes and like having this room for each note to breathe. It just sounds great.
I wanna play. I wanna show a video example of something.
Okay, this is basically it for this part. So, hope this was useful to everybody, and I'm excited to do more of these in the future. We're getting, yeah. And again, if you have any specific concept types of music you want to learn about, feel free to hit me up, and I'll be keeping it. Okay, yeah. Blah 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 blah. I've already said all this stuff. Thank you for coming. And then okay, questions. Yeah. Woo! Okay. So now this is just questions, other random stuff. This is just our chatting. We're chilling. You know, we're just boys hanging out talking about music. You know.
Real quick.
Yeah. What's up?
This is an example I've gone and found of Jacob Collier, my lover.
That's awesome.
Just kind of playing, just showing the power of pure triads without even doing inversions, and showing what you can do with them. It's very important.
Yep, I'm done. Let's watch.
We can just go back a little bit.
With triads, you can achieve so much harmonic motion. Let me show you. So a triad is 3 notes, and the root is on the bottom, and the 5th is on the top, and the 3rd is in the middle. Very nice.
True.
And even without rearranging these notes, there's a lot of description you can do just using triads. Right? It's lovely. Now,
Yeah, no, and then he goes and talks about some other shit.
Yeah. That's triads are super
Triads,
cool.
baby.
If you can write a cool song with triads, you can write anything. So then you add on more notes and it gets cooler. Then you add on 1,000,000 notes. And then you have jazz. Just kidding. They actually know what they're doing.
And you add 10 billion notes and it sounds like
It's true. I'm so proud. I don't think there's anything else. I'm chilling now. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions about this. Yeah, questions about
Okay.
music theory or about
My balls.
yeah, exactly, or like lessons, what you might want to learn about, or anything like that. I'm just chilling. Let me get a cricket sound real quick.
Mozzarella. Why my head hurt?
Yeah, good point. All right.
I think
Is there anything else, or can we end this little sesh?
I think the
Okay, cool. Thank you all for coming.
sure
I
on
don't think
YouTube.
Yeah, we got it all. I guess we're recording it so we can have like an archive of all these if people can't make it. Because like some people have different time zones or whatever, so we thought we would just record them.